The 11th stock I ever bought was Promatech Industries. They were a small Canadian software company. I think their main product was used to track billing for law firms and other businesses that were using copiers and printers. I'm sure I found it with a screener because it was paying a juicy dividend. I bought it January 13th, 2003. So we were still in the hangover from the dot-com implosion. The NASDAQ wouldn't really start to even think about recovering for another 6 months or so. So you could still find lots of technology companies with decent fundamentals selling pretty cheap. I bought 300 shares of Promatech for $2.80 a share. It was paying a semi-annual dividend of 15 cents a share, so it was basically yielding about 10% when I bought it. But the dividends, as I recall, they weren't regular. They were just announced due to their good cash flow. Was I chasing a yield trap, or was this an overlooked gem? Let's get to our guest before we find out. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mark Teague, PhD. He's a noted author. And do you do a little bit of coaching as well right now?
Yes, I do. Yes, I speak public speaking and counseling and things like that. Yes, I do that.
And you're a man of faith. Do you do some preaching?
Yes,
Or
I do. In fact, I preach this Sunday at our local church. I have a number of opportunities to do so. I always take those and to share and serve local folks. We just finished a ministry swing through Oregon in the prisons. I know someone, a cousin, who has a ministry. He works through the prisons, has done so for 20 years, and we joined him, and I spoke in several institutions there. So, the answer is
and,
yes, I do all I can.
and that was in Oregon, right?
Yes, correct.
Wow, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, we stay busy for sure.
So when you started, you did a bachelor's of science in agricultural economics at
Correct.
West Texas A&M.
Yes, well, it's West Texas State at the time. It was independent. It's since joined the A&M system.
And what was the plan? You were raised on a farm?
Yes, raised on a farm and ranch. My hometown was Bovina, Texas, up on the high plains near Clovis, New Mexico, Amarillo, Lubbock area. Delano Estacado, that's was our stomping grounds. And so WT was one of the local universities. And so I graduated high school, enrolled, and got a bachelor's of science in ag economics. My preference was to go to Hardin Simmons in Abilene, but I couldn't afford it. That was a private school, too expensive. So I went to WT.
And then right after that, did you go do your PhD?
No, got married. Melissa and I were married. I graduated a semester early, December of 85. She graduated that following spring from high school, and we were married right after that. There's a 4 year age gap. We grew up together. We have a picture of me attending her second birthday party when she turned 2 years old. So we had the very traditional American background, farm and ranch all the way. So we married, had kids. We had two kids, a family of four, and then we went to graduate school to Oklahoma State University.
So you had 4 kids at home as you're in graduate school.
Well, two kids at home. We had two kids later. We had four total. We raised four. We had to have an 8 year gap in between the two sets, and that was graduate school right in there.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's great. So you studied economics to begin with. Was that
Yes.
always something you were interested in?
I went to my bachelor's at WT. I wasn't sure. I preferred something in agriculture, but I was unsure if I would go down the plant science, animal science route or straight business, go down the business major route, something along those lines. But I really got hooked into economics. And what really drew me in was this combination of the analytical side. It's very mathematical, very structural. It's like the engineering side of things, but it's about human choice, people making choices. I was really drawn to that. I like that a lot. And so when we made the career decision to go to Oklahoma State University, I had a deep love for that field. So I wanted to finish it out, and I knew I would either go academia, the university route, and be a professor, or go industry and make my way and with using the economics skills. And that has fascinated me to this day, the whole notion of human choice and how you can study that and use that to create a business plan and to understand human society, how it works. I'm fascinated to this day endlessly. I just love that.
Well, that's something we have in common. Yeah, I do. I do love economics. And so you did not pursue academia, or did you? I know at that time it was kind of hard to find a job. All the boomers were still well ensconced in their position.
Yes. That was true. I got some great advice. My major advisor, I had two. One left, went to University of Tennessee. I took up a second one. He told me right away, he said, the traditional route is write a dissertation, It's usually a 300-400-page document. And then as soon as you get your first job, turn that into articles, publish journal articles. He told me, he said, write the articles first and then put them together as a dissertation. I did that. So I had 5 published referee journal articles, and I tacked those together as my dissertation. I had multiple job offers, no problem. It was a tight market, but he gave me, and it was because of him. I credit him. He guided me down that path, and it was very successful. It also made me a top-notch researcher right away. I understood all the application of it. So I was primed and ready for either academia or business. I chose business because it just seemed like a more natural fit. I like that immediate application, the challenge of a business plan. We've enjoyed that path. I'm glad we made that choice. But I had a good experience in the job market, in a tough job market, because my major prof had me prepared. He had me ready. Dr. Harry Mapp, and I credit him. He gave me great advice.
Well, I think that's probably good advice still for young people that are going to grad school to focus on
Yes.
education because that's how you get employed. That's how you get a job.
Yes. Get something that's firm, that's established. In academia, it truly is publish or perish. So just accept it, get after it, get some research published, and that makes you qualified and it helps you in every way. There was no way that that was a disadvantage. It was an advantage in every way.
So why did you decide not to go with the academia route? And where did you start? Sears comes later.
Yeah, Sears was the second job that I had. I went to American Express first, and that was my choice. I had 4 university job offers as a professor and 1 offer in business, which was American Express, the banking industry, banking and finance. It all came down to expectations over time of the application, what I would be doing on a daily basis, and the expectations of how that would play out over the next 3 decades. That swung us. So I went the business route. It really was personal preference. I just wanted that immediate challenge and feedback. And I grew up in farm and ranch where your incentives are straightforward. As if you don't work, you don't eat. It's very, very visceral, very real. And so I wanted that again. I wanted that same challenge, and I saw that in the business world. So I took it.
Did you like the teaching aspect? Because you probably
Yes.
must have done some TA work.
Yes, I did research a lot too, both research and teaching. I did like it a great deal, and I do that now. I do a lot of teaching now and public speaking. But the routine and rote nature of academia was just not my thing. You get into a rut, becomes fairly constrained. I wanted that more open, free range, take problems as they come. Whatever happens that day, you got to deal with it. That's what I wanted. So it was strictly personal preference. But yes, a lot of teaching, a lot of research.
Was the money a lot better too to go into industry, or was it about the same?
About 2.5 times industry over academia. Yeah, the starting salaries were it was a little better in industry, not a whole lot, but what happened quickly thereafter, big difference, big difference.
What did you do for American Express? Were you in charge of credits? Is that right?
Yes, it was their charge card and their credit cards that they launched. It started out with risk management. I started as a modeler. I was building statistical models, econometrics. And I love this throughout. I've always done strategy in the business world, all the way up to the executive level. I started out at the very hands-on level, building proprietary models, predicting behaviors, and we would embed those in policies to help manage American Express manage their risk, their revenue, fraud, bankruptcy, all the basic drivers of their P&L. We would put statistical models behind those, implement those all around the world. I worked in the Asian markets, the European markets, domestic. So from product launch, product design, all the way through to back in to recovery. So you have an account that's charged off, you're trying to collect on that. We would work on that as well. So all things strategy. And then I added marketing, and then I added operations, and then my executive career really took off after that.
And then you went to Sears,
Yes.
and now it seems like as soon as you left, it went downhill. You were holding it together? Is that
I tell you what, that was an interesting experience. So I got there in the days of Arthur Martinez. He was the CEO. And
Mhm.
then we had, oh man, his name slips in my mind. But right as I was leaving, like 6 months before I moved on, that's when the private equity guy came in, Edward Lampert. Eddie Lampert. Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you, he may listen to this someday. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, he was a disaster. He truly was. He was the epitome of everything that's wrong with private equity. But hey, let the markets work. If you want to take cash flow at the expense of your future, you can do so. But don't think there isn't a cost. Yeah, he absolutely drove that company straight into the ground. He's responsible for that. And we had a strong company. When I got there, we were number two in retail sales. We had slipped to number six, still strong. And that's in terms of total volume and growth. We're still very strong. He wrecked it 100% all the way. It was sad to watch. I was there during the heydays, the glory days of Sears when it was a top notch retailer. And to watch what he did to that company it's painful to see. But that's the cost of freedom. That's the price of freedom. We all need to learn and do better. It really was cash flow at the expense of everything else. He was funneling that into dividends, basically into his pocket. And he would just completely wreck any growth plans, any investment back into the company. He would torpedo that and pocket the cash. Well, you're going to tank. Yes, you're going to tank. You got to keep up. These are the days of coal and Target and the off mall movement, and you got to stay fresh and stay with that. He refused. He wanted the cash in his bank account. He got it, but at quite an expense.
Yeah, I remember that. He was heralded as the next Warren Buffett. He was going to use this as his holding company and then go on and do great things. There was going to be a huge turnaround. And I remember that share price going up like crazy. I almost bought in at one point. I think I'd actually put in a limit order and it never hit my price. I'm sure I was disappointed at the time, but in retrospect, I got lucky. But yeah, I remember those days. He was doing interviews on MSNBC and everywhere all the time. But yeah, it didn't quite turn out, I think, the way he planned, and certainly not the way Sears employees would have hoped. I think he ended up doing okay, but definitely not Sears.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's very wealthy. But here's the thing, the key lesson there is something that every investor should remember, every business person, every citizen, in fact. Who determines value? It's the customer. The customer always, the consumer, determines value. On the production side, you determine cost, the cost of production. You determine product design and quality. The consumer determines value. Don't you ever forget that. Those are the fundamentals. They never change. So Eddie came along and he acted like the customer was a nuisance in the way. They don't really matter. It's strictly cash flow. You're a fool. You're an absolute fool. And we saw that start. I could have saved you all of your angst. I saw it right from the beginning what he was doing. This is not going to turn out well. And it didn't. Turned out well for him, not good for anybody else. I mean, to think that, if you're standing in 1995 and to think that there would be no Sears Roebuck in the United States, it's hard to imagine. He got it done. He sure did. He managed it. But he was just a strong arm, one of those, the vulture capitalist at its absolute worst. That was him. That's life. That's freedoms.
Now, you didn't have like a 401k all invested in Sears stock or anything.
They were getting into trading now and stock stuff, but I'll tell you, I always hedged my bets. So I always had a risk management plan. I never loaded up on company stock, with one exception that came later when I went private equity. I loaded up there, and that paid out handsomely, very well. But we owned the plan. We were creating the plan and implementing the plan. But when I was in a position of I went through all the management levels. At Amex, I was an entry level employee. I went through lower management, middle management, upper management, and then finally the C suite ranks. And all those middle rungs, I would not load up on my company stock, because you never know what fool's going to come along and what they're going to do. I'm not about to put all of my livelihood in that one basket. So I would spread things out. And I did that at Sears, and boy, I'm glad I did it. I had a certain amount, but no more than I could afford to lose. There was
Yeah.
a clear risk management strategy there.
Now, Amex would have turned out pretty good for you. Did you get in
Very
some
good. Oh, yes,
stock?
it did. It
Oh,
did
okay.
turn out well. Yeah, that was a much better run company. Amex is a very smart company. So yes, I had some more there. It paid well, paid very well.
Okay, and then you went to Toyota for a bit?
Yes. Yeah, I spent almost 8 years there. One of the smartest, most brilliant companies that I've ever seen. I'll tell you a story about Toyota. We went through the financial crisis with them. Started in '07 with the mortgage and meltdown. Then that blitz started with high risk subprime home mortgages. Then it went to auto credit pretty quick. I was with the financial services side. So that year in '08 was the first year in like 73 years Toyota had lost money. That was a very severe downturn. It went through '09, the recession. But I tell you, you got to contrast this, Terry. So I'm there on the inside, and we are working our tails off to address that crisis, those challenges. And we did. We got it done. We turned it around in just a few months. We got things back to profitability and a solid status. But let me tell you, while the entire Detroit set of automakers were going for bailouts, you remember the whole auto
Hmm.
bailout, Chrysler, et cetera, et cetera. Toyota was sitting there with $90 billion in cash on their balance sheet. They never pulled a single research program, never. They stayed with their investment plan, their view for the future. There's no company better in terms of they go into a market, they don't pull out. They're very careful in their engineering. And for them to go into a market and understand the preferences, the consumer demand before they launch a product, and then to engineer around that, pure genius, pure genius. And then they're very conservative in their cash flow on their balance sheet. So when that major downturn came, which basically wrecked Detroit and wrecked our national balance sheet, they never batted an eye. It never phased their long term plan in the least bit. So I learned so much from them about how to build a brand, how to build a brand and a balance sheet, to be consistent in your application of skill so that you have a long term view. They were genius. I value my time there for what I took away from that. It was a pleasure to be a part of.
Well, that must have been pretty intense, though. I would imagine you had a
Oh yeah.
lot of auto loans in default.
Oh, yes, very intense. Yeah, but we went to work. We had a good base. I had branched into operations heavy at that point. So by that time, I had strong risk management. I always had high end analytical skills. That's why I went to Oklahoma State. And then I'd brought in the marketing side. That was through both Amex and Sears. And then by the time I got to Toyota, I was heavy into operations, the application of all of those strategies. And we had a good solid base. We built it systematically so that you could make changes in strategy as the market changed and do it at the account level. So, all the way from marketing to product offering to managing ongoing accounts at the individual account level, all the way through to the end, we had a very strong system. That was what I focused on, building that out and make sure it was strong. And that made the difference. That allowed us to respond when the market changed and to plan and execute for the future. It gave us great strength.
But what are you guys doing when people are just can't pay their auto loans?
Here's the thing about risk management, Terry, and this is what I loved about the banking and finance world. You make a decision today, but the quality of that decision won't be known for some period going forward. It depends on what the choice is. For instance, if it's acquisition, it's about a 2-year window. If it's a line of credit change on a credit card, do I give another 5,000 in extended credit or not? That's about 6 months, about a 6 months frame. If you're looking at response rate on a particular product, like you're rolling out a credit card or some rewards loyalty program, that's about a month, about a 30-day window that you read that. So in each of your P&L models and your decision points, you have a window. We would go as far out as 3 years, often 2 years. I have gone as far as 5 years in predicting the events. So you make sure you have a rock solid statistical view and then the ability to adjust as things change. So here's the key to us being able to respond in 2008. A meltdown started in '07. That was the first shock. And then it bled into '08. We already had in place controls before that. So we knew the nature of our book. We knew the nature of our portfolio. We knew what to do to change. We knew how long it would take to roll over tranches, vintages of paper, and how that would affect it. That's the contrast in Goldman Sachs. You've seen Margin Call probably, right?
Yep.
That movie? Well, those dudes didn't care. So they got hung. They took it in the shorts because they had all the modeling, but they forgot there's a customer out there. I talked to those guys. We interviewed several for jobs. on the tail end of that. They talk about, well, we have these strips and they're throwing off all kinds of cash. Said, you realize there's a Joe and Jane Smith sitting in a counter out there talking about their monthly budget that's driving it. Do you know that? They had no idea. They had lost that completely. So when you get into the derivatives, you're building distance to your customer. The customer is the one that's going to make that choice. Get close to your customer, stay close to them, and then you're prepared to change with them. And we did a fine job of that at Toyota. We already were with our customer. We were on the phone with them every day. So I'm in operations. We're talking to them all day long. We know our customer very well. If you forget that, you're toast. You're toast. Lehman Brothers. So yeah, they were a lesson in how not to do finance. Don't forget there's a person out there paying the bills. If you forget that, you could talk about risk all the time. You have no idea what you're facing.
All right. So, and then the last one that I wanted to talk about was Berry Financial Group, and I wasn't
Yes.
really familiar with them. They're more local to Houston area.
Started Houston. Barry, actually. Bar's how you say it. It's a family name. It was a family company started local right in Houston. And when I went with the private equity group, we bought that as a local entity in Houston. And then we rolled out that model across the country. So that was our play in the private equity world. We took a couple of three platforms that were small and local, and then we expanded those. We put them together, bolted them together, and then created a plan around it, all the strategies. We made all the changes necessary to make that expandable, to make it scalable. And then we took it across the country. That was very successful.
So I guess we maybe skipped a step then. So how did you get involved in private equity?
Yeah, see, that's a great story too. That lesson to your listeners in networking, it was through contacts, through people I knew at work. So a guy that I worked with at Toyota, we worked together over years, probably pushing 2 years. We became very good friends, worked in operations a lot. He helped establish that private equity group. So that private equity group started in the grocery retail, the meat market. So it was purely a Hispanic market play, very much embedded in the Hispanic communities. So they start with the meat market, the small meat markets. Those are very popular Latino communities, very local to that community. They wanted to expand into financial services. Well, my friend got involved at that point. They started with the wire transfer services, check cashing, wire transfer services, the transactional nature of banking products. Then they wanted to get into credit, bring credit into the game. Well, that's where my friend joined them, and he called me. He said, we've got a great opportunity. I want you to look it over. And I did. We looked it over. We talked it was about a year and a half. And then I left Toyota and joined them. So I would say to your listeners, networking is quite important. Build good relationships, build them strong. They will create opportunities that you would never have otherwise. So that's what brought me into the private equity world. And that was a very profitable venture. It's so much fun. I spent 10 years there. It was like a culmination of everything I'd ever done was called upon, demanded to make that succeed. I had such a good time. That was so much fun.
And you were chief operating officer at Bari.
A dual chief credit and chief operating officer, both. Yes.
So how does that work? I mean, I guess you don't have to tell us everything, but how does the compensation work? Are you part owner in this, and then when you guys exit, you get a portion of that, or?
Well, I bought into the fund, so I became a shareholder into the fund, and with that comes a significant equity stake. And then you have a salary for your daily work efforts, but it's that equity stake that you're really working for. And we had an exit plan. The entire fund was set up in order to turn it and to sell it, and we got that done. We achieved our goals. We met our business plan, and we sold at a very nice, profitable level. And that's when I retired. I retired from banking at that point. So yeah, that was very successful. And you ask about the best stock trade. That's my best. That one paid handsomely.
So you bought into the private equity fund kind of both as an employee, but also a part owner of the fund.
Yes.
Then you guys acquired a couple companies, a couple financial services companies, put them together.
Yes, we bought some platforms. Yeah, three different platforms we purchased. They were small at the time, and then we grew those over time. And that buying into the fund, that was a part of the package, a part of the offering for me to join. So I was leaving Toyota. I had a very nice pension plan there, and I was well into developing that. So this whole stock offering and equity arrangement, that was part of the package to bring me there. And it worked very well. And I was so glad to help them create and execute the plan. So there were 5 of us executives that basically determined the plan and then executed that year over year and answered to the investors.
And then did you sell to another private equity firm? Was that how that exit worked?
It was a consortium of 4 buyers that bought us in the end. We went through an extensive sale process, entertained a whole number of buyers, up near the count of 30, actually. And there were 20 of them that actually quite serious, got down to actual offerings. 6 of them were dead serious, right up next to a sale. The one that finally bought us was a consortium of 4 buyers. 2 of those were private equity funds. And that's how that shook out in the end. And one was a competitor.
Huh.
Someone that we competed against and torched them, I might add. We beat them soundly in the marketplace, but they wound up buying us out in the end.
So that what'd you do with that money? Did you buy a bunch of land?
Well, I do have some land. Yeah, I got back into the Texas farm and ranch business. I don't have to scratch a living off of it, so I'm very happy about that. But I have investment that is secure and diversified as I want it to be. And yes, we do have a nice ranch here.
Okay, well then let's get into the stocks.
Yes.
So what was the first thing you ever bought?
I'll set aside some of those early company stock pieces. Those are given to me as benefits.
Sure.
When I actually went out and bought stock, it was an index growth fund at Vanguard. That was the first one that I bought. And it was just average. It kind of petered out, and I wound up rolling it over to, it wasn't my worst buy, but it was my first. And I end up liquidating that and rolling it into another fund. So
But do you
that
remember
was
what it was, just S&P 500 fund or
no, it was a growth index. In
oh,
fact, the
okay.
ticker was VGIX, if I remember right. It was one of the more broader market index funds, and it did not perform all that well at the time.
Well, what year are we talking? Do you remember? Like is this or like
Let me
late 90s?
think. I'm pretty sure that was in the late 90s, I
Yeah.
think. Before 2000 for sure. Around that 96, 97 time frame right in there.
I did the exact same thing. I think I was 99 and I bought into some, growth fund thinking, "Yes, this is great." And then 2000 hits and yeah, no,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
good.
I'd actually rolled it over before then, but yeah, that one didn't pan out too well for me.
Okay, so what was your worst? Was that your worst or is there
No, no, you remember the open source code days. You
okay,
remember that you remember Linux and Red Hat and that
sure.
thrust? Well,
Yeah.
I chose Linux and Red Hat is the one that succeeded. So I chose poorly. That was my worst trade. I went into that one thinking that was going to multiply big time. It actually delisted. It wound up doing nothing, but Red Hat took off pretty good.
Well, and the funny thing is Linux still runs like ha half the internet, I think,
You
but
wonder what
but
happened there. I don't know, but I never fully understood why my investment did not play well. But that was my worst trade for sure.
and then besides, obviously, it sounds like the private equity deal was the best one.
Yes.
But besides that, can you think of maybe a publicly traded stock that you did really well on?
I got to give some history there. So when I came out of graduate school, I was actually seriously considered being a day trader, making a living, because I was chock full of tools, technical tools. So that's a very popular route and enticing route.
And this is mid 90s, right?
Yeah, 95 is when I left Oklahoma State. So
Well, that was peak day trading time, right? Everyone was getting into it then.
oh, yeah. I actually I got data, I had my model set up, I was ready to go. And as I was working on that, 2 things that I read. One was Burton Malkiel's Random Walk Down Wall Street. If you've seen that
Great.
book, great book. Every trader should read that book.
Yeah.
It's a must read. And then secondly, being in academia and economics, there's nothing studied more than the stock market. There's so much research on that. I read a couple of studies that basically gave this information. I'll be a little wrong on the numbers, but it's pretty close. It's indicative. So they did like a 30-year study. And over those 30 years, it's on every given year, the gains in the market are like 28 trading days. That's where you get that. If you miss like 5 of those, your gains are in half. If you miss 10 or 12, you're flat, you're level. So, it struck me that's how good you have to be. That's you're competing against other traders, and if you're going to beat the market, you have to be that good. So I realized, I don't want a second job, so I'm going to work my first job, maximize my income, and be more diversified in my investments. So basically, a get rich slow approach. And that has served me well. So from that point on, I still go with index funds, but I like the sector funds. I really like those. And I've used those a lot, and they have served me well. I'm very pleased with that. But it's not a get rich quick, it's a get rich slow approach for sure. And I would tell every trader as well, here's a couple things to remember. Remember, there are two main things going on in the market on a daily basis: the fundamentals and the technical side. Those are the two forces that are at play. And if you want to beat the market, you're going to have better information on one of those two fronts. You need to pick your stanchion and get really, really good at it. I had a friend actually executed on that plan. He became a day trader. He wound up moving to the exchange because he felt like he had better information. So he actually took up office right down on the floor because he could get data coming in right away, and bake that into his trades. He had a very sophisticated econometric model that he would use. He was heavy on the technical side. He used the floor for the fundamental side, and he made a full-time living at that for a good while. So I don't know if he's still in it, but he was for a few years. And I decided to make my living elsewhere and be a long-term investor.
So then when you say what your best was, would that be just an index fund?
My best investment was at Bari Financial Group, that
Yeah.
private equity. Oh, absolutely the best. But not far behind that would be these index funds that I use, the sector index funds, particular sector in the economy. And I would say to your audience, you can beat the market average by picking sectors out of the market. Some sectors outperform others, and they do consistently over time pick those. That will work. I've found that to be very successful. You just want to make sure you have a risk management plan. So every day trader, it's like going to Vegas. You need to make sure you can curb your losses and let your profits run. You better have a plan for that, or you're not going to be there long. You'll lose out on your cash. But it's the same way in those sector funds. If you have a risk management plan and you're looking for those growth opportunities, they're out there and they're steady and they're reliable, but always be mindful of your time frames. How long can you stay in the market? It's like buying a house. If you know you're going to sell that house in a year and a half, don't buy one, rent, because you don't know what's going to happen. But if you're going to be there 3 years, especially 5, absolutely buy a house. That is the best investment you'll make. With the market gain, instead of paying rent, pay yourself. You will gain equity in that. Plus, you have a tax break, significant tax break on that interest expense. But it's all about time frames. And that's true in your market trade activity. Ask yourself, how long before I need that money? What's my time frame? How long can I leave it in the market? And that will determine what kind of investment you make.
All right, well, let's talk about the book now. And I'm going to confess, I haven't read it, but I did check out some of the graphs you have available online there. Uh,
Yeah.
it's called A Working Man's Guide: Strong
Yes.
Values, Strong Life, Strong Legacy.
Got it right here. Working Man's Guide. Here you go. Yep.
So, what inspired you to write this book?
The experience from growing up farm and ranch, deeply traditional American values and community character, et cetera, and then working through corporate America in the modern world, there were just some principles that were so crystal clear, burned into your mind over that. It produced a passion for the American working class out of all that. And those principles of success, I'll tell you, Terry, what I found myself doing, coming out of the farm life where things are so straightforward in terms of work and incentives. You get into the corporate world and there's nothing straightforward. I mean, there's every shenanigan that you can think of that gets pulled. Well, I realize I have to succeed in a team environment. I need to get a team to perform so that we can meet our goals. Well, what I found myself doing was reaching back in time to those old fashioned solid principles, things that work, things that are bedrock, and applying them in today's world, modern application. And I was doing that over and over and over. Well, some things became very clear. I wanted to write it down so everyone could read. And that's the impetus behind the book. That's the purpose of it. I badly want the American working class to succeed. I truly have a passion for it. And by the way, we need to define working class in a literal sense. We need to forget about income. That doesn't matter. The working class is a class that is working, a very literal definition. The principles are the same. The principles that work are the same. They are not different. Melissa and I have lived with tight budgets. We've been church mice poor, very thin budgets to very moderate budgets to very thick, wide budgets. The principles we live by, they're the same. They've not changed over all that course of time. When we talk about income, we're just creating class warfare. We're pitting groups against each other. That's counterproductive. The principles that work for everyone are eternal. They're time tested. They work. We need to focus on that. That unites us. That brings us together. That makes our nation strong. That's my passion.
Well, we won't ask you to tell us all the principles because people got to buy the book, but maybe share with us one thing that you think, one takeaway. What's one principle that you should focus on?
I'll hit two quickly. One is a question. What do you stand on? What's your foundation? You need a bedrock. In market economics, you and I believe strongly in the free market. I do with a passion. There's only one ethic that is inherent in free market activity. It's the ethic of gain. Consumers are going to work to maximize their utility. Producers are going to work to maximize profitability. That dynamic that goes on is very powerful, very positive. It elevates all of humanity. But if you want to have a decent society, you need more ethics than that. You bring them. Those are the ethics that you bring to the game. So, what is your foundation? What's your guidepost? What's your North Star? What do you look to define that? You're going to need it. Life is going to run right over you. It is not kind, it is rough and tumble. It is difficult. What do you stand on? Every human needs to think carefully about that foundation. You're going to need it. And secondly, problem solving. The attitude about life towards problems goes a long ways to defining who you are. In fact, it's defining our country right now. You need to accept life for what it is. It's a series of problems coming your way. Are you going to be prepared to deal with those? If you accept that fact, the nature of life as a series of problems, you become a serious person. You're an adult. You can be worked with, you can be relied upon, you can contribute. If you reject that premise, we have a whole set of people now saying, I'm too good for that. I'm above that. When life presents me with problems, it's somebody else's fault. They did it. I shouldn't be hassled. If that's your approach, and we have a lot of folks doing that, you're a child. You're immature. You cannot be relied upon. You cannot be depended upon. You have a childish, selfish view. You're not a serious person. So accept life for what it is, a series of problems. And you have then a chance to get something done. You have a chance to contribute and build something worthwhile. I would say those two things to your audience.
And when you've done the tours of the prisons just recently, you're handing out the book as well.
Yes, I donated quite a few copies, a full carton actually, on that prison trip, and happy to give it to them. I spoke. That was the impetus of the trip. The person that runs that ministry up in Oregon said, "Would you build a presentation out of your book and bring it with us?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be glad to." So I chose chapter two. I pulled material out of chapter two and formed a presentation, and we went from there. It worked very well.
Well, it sounds like that's a message that maybe is good for that audience.
It's foundational things. I've shared it outside the prison as well. It's good for every human. But what I found there was the engagement factor was very high. The hunger and the desire to hear something that works, something that's solid, that's bedrock foundation. They were eager for that. And I was very pleased with that.
The one thing I forgot to ask you about was you did run your own business, Lone Star Munitions or
Yes.
Teague Tactical. You guys made ammunition for small caliber rifles. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Small arms, both rifle and pistol. So the story on that is growing up at farm and ranch, we use firearms often. They're always with us. When I was in Arizona, starting with American Express, but especially with Toyota Financial Services, I got into competitive shooting. And I started loading my own, doing my own reloads. And I told Melissa often, I said, I'd like to do this commercially when I retire. So we got to Toyota, Bari Financial Group in Houston. Our kids are getting older. Our last one graduated high school. And Melissa said, I've got time on my hands. So, what should I do? And I said, well, we could start the ammo business. I was mostly joking. I thought she would never in a million years do that. She thought it over a minute and said, yeah, that's perfect. Exactly what I want to do. So she started it. She was the founding member. She was full time for about 3 years. I was part time, evenings and weekends. And then when I retired from Bari, I joined her full time and we built the company up and then sold it off after that.
Well, I was going to say that around that time there was some private equity players in that space as well.
Still are, yes. In fact, several foreign funds. Private equity owns Winchester, owns Federal. It's a consortium. Vista, they own several consortiums, and they've gotten stronger. It is consolidating under the private equity umbrella, that's for sure. That was happening
How
then, it's still happening now.
how did that turn out for you financially?
You know, it turned out good. It's solid, very solid. A key decision there, we decided to move to Abilene out of Houston because our grandkids are here and they were stable. So we wanted to spend more time with them. That changed the nature of the company. We wound up, that's why we sold it. That changed the path quite a bit, but it was a solid plan, a good plan. That was interesting in that we went through COVID. So we launched it in 2017. In 2020, COVID hit. Boy, that was quite a shock in the ammo world. The demand went through the roof. And I could tell you the big thing that sparked demand was COVID itself was big, but not as big as defund the police. When that started, it was like a rocket ship. You know, everyone is rational. They knew what that meant. It's okay, you're going to defund the police. I'll have to take care of that myself. And they did. They bought guns all over the place. Joe Biden and Barack Obama are the best gun salesmen this country has ever seen. They sold more weapons.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. The fact that COVID and COVID policies, they created winners and losers. And for some people, it worked out great for them. I mean, from a business perspective, at least.
It was a big boon to the ammo world, I can tell you that. Huge.
Sure.
You know, it's not that I would wish for that, but I'm a capitalist at heart, so okay, I'll take it. If that's how we're going to do things, that is a lesson in absolute abysmal public policy. That whole phase in COVID, it's hard to imagine us handling that worse than we did. Anyway, we sorted it out, we got it behind us, so hopefully we won't make some of those mistakes again.
So now you're mostly retired and you have a decent amount of land that you manage for mostly conservation purposes. Do you do some hunting on your land there too?
Yes, I do, definitely. We hunt and we manage it for native wildlife, plants and animal, both. And yes, retired except for the author work. I'm full-time author and speaker, and I put a lot of time and effort into that. You know, I'm one of those guys, Terry. I think if you tried to actually retire and do nothing, I'd be dead in 6 months. I mean, you get so used to working that I think we're meant to work. We're supposed to work. I'll work to my dying breath, and I hope that's a long, long time from now. But you do get to choose the list. you, you choose the activities, and that's very nice, very nice. But it's all about authorship and writing and speaking these days.
And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Go to the website, start there. Working Man's Guide. It's just take out the apostrophe, a workingmansguide.com. Take you right to it. Be it email there and contact information. Social media sites are on there. Facebook, I have two, a workingmansguide.com and Dr. Mark L. Teague. Same on Instagram, and they can get a hold of me there.
Well, you have such a broad background and experience. What are some of the things you'd be willing to talk about for people if they want to book you as a speaker?
Well, I tell you, the theme of that book is chapter 1 is about problem solving because I see that as a dividing line issue. That separates wheat from chaff, men from boys, people that are serious, people that aren't. You need to face that up front. And then what I do in the book is take those basic principles of problem solving and apply them to every major area of life that a working class family will face. So, first of all, it's problem solving itself and the nature of life. The second thing I go into is faith. This whole notion of faith, belief in God. Why does it matter? Why should you spend any time on that? Is it legitimate or not? I take a very analytical, rational approach to that. Third is marriage itself, the structure of marriage. Next is the relationship of marriage. Next is raising kids. Next is career, profession, making a living. The last one is public policy as it relates to a working family. And I just stepped through all of those, and I have two examples in chapter 1. So I've got a whole list of applications of sound problem solving principles. I could talk about any one of those, that whole aspect of the cycle of the working class family, all aspects of it. I love to speak on all of those or teach. We can do courses, we can do presentations, we can do conferences, whatever meets the need. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, I would agree with you. I think probably the most important decision you make in your life is who you end up marrying.
Oh yeah, big time, big time. Yeah, I agree completely. You know, I put a lot of time in the book on research, and it's well cited, lots of references, and on those chapters on marriage and family. The truth is, the social sciences have caught up with the old fashioned values. It's very clear. There's a ton of research out there. And here are the facts. Here's a summary. Do you want to have more wealth? Do you want to be wealthier? Get married and stay married. Do you want to have better health? get married and stay married. Do you want to be happier in life, more contentment? Get married and stay married. The data is crystal clear. There's like a marriage separation happening, a marriage gap. Those that commit to marriage, those that don't, you're living in two different worlds. And one is distinctly better than the other. Those are hard facts now. So I make that clear in chapter 3.
And one other thing I saw in a video of yours was you talked about how whether you're on the left or on the right, we all want the same thing.
Yes, peace and prosperity. We're all after peace and prosperity. We often disagree on how to get there, but we want the same thing. So we need to unite around that. And I focus on that in the book, and I do that in my presentations. Let's talk about those fundamental, foundational things that help all of us. Stop talking about things that divide us. Let's get down to those bedrock things that benefit the entire human race. That's what we need to discuss.
Well, thank you very much. We've been speaking with Dr. Mark Teague, PhD, and his book is A Working Man's Guide. Strong values, strong life, strong
Here it is
legacy.
again.
Got it there. Go and buy it today. I think it's $18.99 paperback, $9.99 as an ebook, and you can
Yep.
get it right at the website, which is aworkingmansguide.com.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being so generous with your time. You got a fascinating life, and it sounds like you're living the dream there in Texas and Abilene.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Terry. I wish you the best and your audience as well. I hope we've added value today.
I think we have. Thank you very much.
Take care, sir.
For the next 2 years after I bought it, Prometech continued to be a cash cow. It yielded over 10% in dividend payments. I sold my whole position in February of 2005 for $3.45 a share. So after dividends, I got a compound annual rate of over 16%, not too shabby. I didn't sell for any other reason than I needed the cash. I was still in university and I had a rental property where unfortunately the tenant wasn't paying reliably. So rather than take on more debt, I liquidated a bunch of my holdings. Prometech was taken private in 2007 at $2 a share. So I actually was lucky to get out at the price that I did. And as we talked about before, if you're in the value game, buying companies that are selling cheaply in the market, you should expect to get your fair share of buyouts or takeovers because somebody else will see that the market isn't recognizing the value of the business. You're not going to be the only one that recognizes this thing as a value if you're doing it right. While that can result in a nice payout for you when you get bought out, unfortunately, the buyouts don't always reflect what you think the company's worth. And I mean, that makes sense because the person or the company that's buying it thinks that they can realize an even greater profit by taking it over, which is the same reason you're probably buying it. Some fact checks and more info from our conversation there with Dr. Teague. I said that Linux runs something like half the internet. But when I asked Google if Linux runs half the internet, it replied, no, it does not run half the internet. It runs over 90% of it. Now, ChatGPT gave me a bit more nuanced version, but the fact is that it does run a boatload of stuff, including apparently all of the world's supercomputers. Dr. Teague recommended Burton Malkiel's A Random Walk Down Wall Street. I would certainly echo that recommendation, and I'm sure it's been mentioned on the podcast before. Anyone who's going to play a role in their own investing should read it. Spoiler alert, you should just buy the index. The one that he talked about owning, one of the indexes he talked about owning was VGIX. That's a Vanguard Growth Index. And while it did have a few bad years after the dot-com bubble that he talked about, it's been on a tear ever since. In fact, it returned 132% in the last 3 years. But to be fair, the markets have been ripping. It basically met its benchmark. If you look at the return on American Express stock from when Dr. Teague worked there until now, it's been over 4,000%, including splits and dividends, which if he's been holding it that whole time is a compound annual return of over 13%. Pretty good. We talked about how trading can negatively impact your return, and Dr. Teague was pretty much dead on with his recall of the research. So there's data from Bloomberg and Invesco, and it shows that in the 30 years from 1994 to 2024, the S&P 500 would have turned 100,000 into over $2 million. Okay, so if you invested over those 30 years, you would have turned 100,000 into over $2 million. However, if you missed just the 10 best days, you would have cut your returns in half. So instead of turning 100,000 into 2 million, you would have turned 100,000 into just over 1 million. If you missed the top 1% of trading days, you'd have negative returns. And then to top it all off, 15 of those best days in the last 30 years, they all happened during what would we otherwise be characterized as crisis times. So during COVID, and then near the peak of the global financial crisis, or the GFC, in 2008. So basically, market timing is a fool's errand. Please remember that the information on Terry Hogan Talks Stocks is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not investment advice. Please do your own due diligence, and you should probably just buy the index anyway. The opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, Eddie Lampert, or the great state of Texas. If you like what you hear on the show, please do all the things like follow, rate, leave a review, tell a friend. If you have questions or would like to be a guest on Terry Hogan Talk Stocks and tell us about your first, your worst, your best, and your last investment, you can find me on X at Terry M. Hogan, or you can send me an email at terrymhogan@gmail.com. I'll leave you with a quote from Warren Buffett out of his 1996 letter to shareholders. We continue to make more money when snoring than when active. Inactivity strikes us as intelligent behavior.